Hello, everyone. Welcome to L3 Philosophy with Emmy. This is the show where we share tools and experiences and stories to help you L3, which is love yourself, love your relationships, and love your life. And today I am very excited to have my guest, Deanna Wheeler. She is a yoga instructor and has been my yoga instructor over the past couple of years. And she's also a yoga student and a mom. She is currently the yoga department leader at Lifetime in Burlington, and she has 15 years of teaching experience. And so she is going to share her wisdom with us today. Welcome, Deanna.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here. Thank you.
You're welcome. So, one of the reasons why I wanted to ask you to come and talk to us today is because I take your classes and I hear the things that you are saying throughout class, and I just find it to be so supportive. Everything that we do in a 1 hour yoga class, I find to be incredibly translatable and transferable into every aspect of our lives. And one thing that you said to me before we started recording was that we are the person that we have probably the most conversation with throughout our day. And we can really notice that when we come to the mat as well. It's a time where we set aside an hour to have a practice, and there could be a lot of chatter in our heads. So, do you want to start by kind of the first L of like loving yourself and how yoga can be a practice that is more than just physical movement that can help us do that?
Yes, absolutely. One of the myths, and I think many in this day and age, especially where we live in the world, think that yoga is about flexibility. It's about, stretching, getting more flexible and touching your toes. And I really emphasize that it is so much more than that. For one, it's a breathing practice, and we utilize the breathing as a way, as a tool to connect inwards and find a deeper connection to ourselves. When we show up for ourselves, or when we're alone and we're having the conversations in our mind, it's important to notice, what is that conversation? What's the tone of the conversation? Are you being negative towards yourself? Are you criticizing yourself, judging? I don't want to assume for everybody, but for many of us, a lot of the times we tend to focus on the critical, the negative. We react to what we see and experience in the external environment. And what our yoga practice can offer us is an opportunity to take a step back, acknowledge the conversation that we're having with ourselves, and with loving kindness, and we start to change the dialogue a little bit, um, to acknowledge that you are enough just as you are. You have everything that you need, whether it's to come to your yoga mat and practice touching your toes or balancing on your head. You have everything that you need within you to be worthy of being on this plane and worthy of loving relationships with other people and finding your happiness. Starting with ourselves is really number one. When we're thinking of finding happiness in our life, you got to start with number one. And if that relationship is not very strong, that conversation with yourself is more negative than supportive. I mean, it can be critical. We can acknowledge our opportunities. But if we're taking what we're receiving from the external world, whether it's negativity, the bad things that are coming at us, if we're internalizing all that and that's all we're self-talking, that might be a chance to take a step back and say, hey, I got to dive a little bit deeper into myself and remember who you truly are. Not
Yeah.
to quote like Moana, but if you watch Disney movies, but truly, I love Disney movies. Disney movies is I think is a great tool for finding wisdom and how to navigate this beautiful thing called life.
Yeah, yeah, be embracing your authenticity and who you are. I think because we can be so self-judgmental. And I really like that you actually made the distinction that it's okay to be critical, however, with maybe without judgment. So one example that I'm thinking of, even just from your classes, classes I've taken with, many other yoga instructors over probably the decade that I've been practicing yoga, is you're noticing, like, for example, you might say how you came to your mat today, what you're able to do with your body today might look different from when you were just here yesterday. Maybe yesterday you could do a full half splits and you felt super limber and flexible, and today you're holding a lot of tension and you can like barely, reach your toes. And so you can be critical in the sense of noticing, oh wow, I'm not doing as well today as I did yesterday, but also without judgment and saying, well, you know what? Today is a completely different day and I'm dealing with different things. So it makes sense that I'm not able to touch my toes today or something along those lines. And I like how, I don't know, you can speak to this, but the job of the instructor when you're leading a class, at least as a student taking it, feels like you're just leading us through movements and a practice of self-compassion. Um, and you're utilizing the breath. Another thing that I hear you say often is, don't worry about what everyone else is doing and what their shapes look like. You're just here with you today. And all I'm really listening to is your breathing. I'm not looking at really any of your shapes. So I find that really helpful in building a self-compassion practice as well. Is that something that you think about when you're kind of verbalizing like what you're telling us to do?
Yeah, 100%. The last thing that I would want students to take from my teaching is where body parts need to go in order to achieve a yoga pose. And we utilize our bodies and we use these shapes that have really only come into existence over the last century and a half, as a tool to be with our breath. Almost in a way, and almost liken it to a little bit of a distraction, because we can get present. Oh, I'm lifting my arm, I'm twisting through my torso. But absolutely, the ultimate goal for me is to kind of lead students back home to their number one teacher,
Mm.
and that is themselves. So yes, do I cue things to get your heart rate up? Do I cue things to help to build flexibility, physical strength? Sure. But a byproduct of that, hopefully, is a finding more flexibility through your mind and your heart, and generating more strength and more capacity to take in all of the things that come at us when we're off of our mat and our off the mat yoga practice.
Mm, for sure. And something that I love that you said help students come back home, because breath is really like our kind of connection, our access to home, right? Because even when we're holding a pose and it's getting to that point where you're like, I'm done with this chair pose and I want to move on, and my thighs are burning and I'm really irritated, I'm frustrated that I'm still in this chair pose. That's the moment when you always cue us back to the breathing. It's like breathe, breathe. And I've noticed that because I've been practicing that in yoga class for years, I only now, after a decade, I would say the past couple of years, and only now do I notice that I now naturally come back to my breath when I'm feeling those same exact things in my life. And so these are really, really important and helpful coping tools that we can use with relationships, with ourselves, with challenges.
You're spot on of, speaking of being in a challenging pose and that place where you may start to physically feel that you need to give up, or, you're distracted and other thoughts are coming into your mind. And that's part of our practice where we kind of sit in that discomfort and breathe through the discomfort. Now, we're not talking like injury, sharp pain, like hurt yourself, but to become comfortable with being uncomfortable. This reminds me, a few years ago, that I had a student once tell me, yoga is supposed to be easy. It's supposed to be easy. It shouldn't be this hard. And it wasn't even necessarily a difficult sequence, although I don't like to label things as difficult because what's difficult for one person might be really easy and vice versa. Um, and I really disagree with that because yoga or our breathing practice, even our sitting with ourself practice, we're we're hitting some really intense edges sometimes because to sit with ourselves, to sit with whether it's the bodily sensations that may be challenging or the thoughts that are going through our mind and being really present with ourselves, that can be really hard, that can be really edgy, and it's okay to have these hard moments. In those hard moments, it's not meant to shame or cause harm. It's meant to expand your capacity to live. So that just it made me think of that story. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to phrase it is expanding your capacity because there are so many times where you think you can only, hold a pose for so many seconds or minutes. But then as you continue to push yourself and breathe through it, you're actually capable of doing it much longer.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of similar with, the challenges in life. It's like you only think that you can handle so much, but if you have access to these tools that can center you and ground you and remember how strong you actually are and can be, it can really help us to kind of elevate in different areas. So, what are some of we've talked about how, there's the movement component where you have different poses that are wonderful for your physicality. What are some of the other branches of yoga that you maybe have learned throughout your teaching experience, through your trainings? I know that you train people to be instructors as well. What are some of maybe the philosophies of yoga or branches that kind of make it much more than just a movement practice?
Yeah. So yoga is the poses, the physicality part is such a tiny part of what yoga really is. And there's many different ways to look at yoga and to examine. One of the more accessible ways to kind of look at our yoga practices to look at the eight limb path as written by Patanjali. So that begins with our yamas and our niyamas, which is our kind of our ethical obligations, our observations, and also, things to abstain from. So that can go from the practice of nonviolence, non-harming, to being truthful, to practicing moderation. And each one of these terms, we could have a 10-hour lecture on about what does this mean and how does this relate to our life, whether it's the internal work that we do or also the outward actions that we set forth. But just an example, when speaking about satya, which is to speak truthfully or to not tell lies, there's many ways to examine that. Many in training, when we pose that, we ask that question, you get, oh, well, yeah, don't tell a lie. Thou shalt not tell a lie. It's not good to lie. And beyond that is, can we take that even to the relationship with ourselves of what are we telling ourselves? And that comes back to our self-talk. Are we degrading ourselves unnecessarily? Are we saying untrue things that are harming us? And on the flip side, if you're speaking untruthfully, almost in the opposite direction, where for instance, say you've made a mistake or you've done something and caused maybe harm to another person, and you're just hell bent on, no, I did the right thing. I'm okay. This is fine. And it's a fine line to distinguish that, but it's really even just that shining the light of awareness and even just knowing that that is something to examine may be enough for people that have not delved into that kind of self-study and that practice to start to consider. And oh, if you're outwardly doing things that are not being received well or unkind, it's okay to say, hey, I can do better. I made a mistake. That's a really a beautiful revelation that I've made in my practice and many of those that I know in my life. And this has nothing to do with downward facing dog,
Mhm.
nothing to do with it. Um, so that's just one example of moving beyond the physical, um, beyond, when we talk about the yamas and the niyamas, then we go to our pranayama, which is breath work. And breath work there's many different types of breath work. But awareness of breath, simply being aware that you're breathing, intentionally moving your breath through your body. Breath work can be very, very powerful. So there's many, many breaths. I won't go into all of those. Then the next kind of limb that is often examined is our physical, our practice, that our hatha yoga of doing shapes. And even within that, there's so much to be broken down there. The next limb that really, even before I started to deepen my practice, because I'll tell you, 15 years ago, when I did my teacher training and I started teaching, I was not where I was energetically within my own physical practice, my mental practice. I was probably still pretty connected to more of the physical parts. But the limb that really stood out to me was pratyahara, which means withdrawal of senses. And this idea of being somewhere and knowing, okay, I'm going to kind of disregard what is happening around me. You're safe, everything's good, and start to do the more inner work and becoming more aware of what's happening within number one, which is always you.
I think that awareness inside of yourself, it is something that I notice instructors are, guiding people toward, the students toward, is like, okay, you're in a warrior pose, like notice what's happening in your legs, notice that you're building heat, paying attention, even just using those words like notice, pay
Mhm.
attention. It's just bringing you into this practice of mindfulness where you're being in your body in the present moment in the environment that you're in, and you're giving yourself a chance to be out of your head for a moment.
There's no wrong, and that's the other thing is the validation that whatever another student, another person takes from their practice, if it's helping them along the way and it's helping them navigate along their path, then that's wonderful.
Yeah. So do you have any stories or, just kind of times in your life where yoga was just like a really important piece for you as far as helping you with, getting through any challenges or your self-discovery or your growth? Like what role has yoga played? I mean, you've been teaching and practicing for so many years now. I would imagine that there have has been an important role that yoga has played in your life.
Yes, there's so many things. Diving deeper into my more like energetic and spiritual practice, which probably happened around, what was it, 2021, tumultuous time of life for many people. And I started to become a lot more clear on what types of relationships that I benefited from and what relationships may have been causing me harm, and taking a really good look at that and learning how to set boundaries with the relationships, to energetically conserve space and to find happiness and to be happy and to feel supported, because ultimately our relationships, there's always going to be tumult, there's things are going to happen, but and we're always changing, but ultimately the relationships in our life should be uplifting and supportive, or that kind of that critical, that kind of the person that gives it to you straight. It doesn't necessarily feel good, but you know that it's coming from a place of love. Like, listen, I'm going to tell you what other people aren't going to tell you. You've got some stuff in your teeth.
Mhm.
Clean your teeth, not you. You're good, but you know, so deepening my own personal practice from a even more of a meditation standpoint, like a sitting and observing my own thoughts and observing my breath, different types of meditation helped me come to that understanding of almost this awareness, like this awakening of this doesn't serve you. Stop trying to force things that don't serve you in your life. Lean into the relationships and the people and the places that are supportive of where you're going right now, where you are right now, and where you want to go. You don't need to be stuck in the past.
Mm. That sounds like a huge piece that is important for people to consider. And I know I've done that in my own life as well, is we can just get into this routine of like, this is just how my life has always been. Or, especially with people in our lives, it's like, well, we've just always been friends. So, you know, you might not necessarily think about, is this relationship actually serving my growth and how I want to feel as consistently as possible and who I'm growing into being, who I want to be, who I want to continue to evolve to be. And sometimes, like you were saying before we started recording, relationships can fall away or change, and that's okay because we're all on a different evolution growth path. And so it would make sense that sometimes you would grow in different ways and different directions from people in your life, and that it's
Mhm.
okay to allow that to happen. It's almost like this embracing of the changes that are happening with the people that you maybe have interacted with even your whole life. Um,
Mhm.
yeah. And that can be really hard and really scary as well, because maybe those people have been your support system or you have been that for them.
Yeah.
Um, but bringing attention to what feels supportive can really help you be intentional about what you're creating in your life, who you choose to interact with more frequently or less frequently, the kind of people that you want to bring into your life. I was just talking with a client actually about if we can focus on how do I want to feel as consistently as possible from day to day, right? Thinking about what would help create that, what would help support that. You're bringing this intention, and I find that in when I'm in a yoga class, there's usually some kind of intention, at least that I am either holding for myself, even if it's just like my intention today is to just like feel, a release of stress in my body, or my intention today is just to be kind to myself because I'm feeling really low energy today. So that's a question I also have for you is at the end of class, we always kind of either roll onto our side or take a shape that's comfortable for us, and you say that we're taking a moment for loving kindness. Is that in itself a specific practice? Is there a way that we can embellish on that?
Yeah. So practicing kindness or love and kindness, the Sanskrit term for that is metta. And metta in conjunction with can go hand in hand with gratitude. So we speak to gratitude and loving kindness. It is so much easier to be hindered by things like self-doubt, by craving things that aren't good for us or overindulging in things. Again, it's the focus on what isn't working or what is causing me to maybe repeat certain patterns. And this practice of love and kindness, it's definitely and gratitude is an internal practice aimed to help to cultivate that compassion and kindness and generosity that we hope to give outwards. But if we're not finding the light and the gratitude even throughout all the chaos and the storms of our life, if we're not finding those little glimmers of gratitude, it's a lot harder to then give that out. And I I feel I say this often also at the end of the class is when we're on the receiving end of negativity, or we feel that we are being harmed by someone, whether it be through their words or their actions, a reminder that oftentimes the way that people treat us is a reflection of how they feel about themselves.
Mm.
That can be a helpful kind of self-love reminder, and also to give yourself that love, because instead of internalizing the way that someone else has treated you or spoken to you, instead of reacting to that and taking that as this is I deserve this, or this is who I am, and I need to change myself in order to fit whatever it is that they want from me, to flip the perspective and say, you know what, that's how you're feeling right now, and that's fine, and I know who I am, and I'm grateful for ABC, and I have that love for myself, with the hope of, by just generating and giving that out, that in time we kind of spread it. It becomes a little more contagious in time.
Yeah, and that can be the hardest thing to practice because we're kind of taught when we're young, like, be nice to other people and be kind to other people. And how
Right.
often are we taught like being kind to yourself is actually something that's going to ripple out naturally into the way that you behave in the world. So I think that's huge because even you gave an example of someone might be outwardly, maybe mean to you or acted in a way that wasn't respectful or kind. But then we can also go on kind of the opposite end of the spectrum too. Somebody who doesn't have a lot of maybe self-value or worth or respect might be really a huge people pleaser and let people kind of walk all over them or be a doormat. And so that's another kind of extreme of maybe needing an opportunity to build that in yourself first so that it can ripple out into how you're engaging with the
Yep.
world.
Yeah. That example just reminds me of learning how to set a boundary, and how to do it in a way that you might ruffle some feathers. It could cause a problem, but the ultimate why behind setting the boundary is for that individual's own well-being, in order to find their balance of, giving love and compassion outward and also receiving it.
Mhm.
So that is very important as well. And really even just talking about it and articulating and having these conversations, whether or not people are on board one way or the other, but having those conversations, being open to doing that deep work. We want everything now. We want answers now. We want fixes now. What's the fix? What's the fix? And oftentimes it's not it's not a quick fix. It is taking that time to start to be with yourself, find that loving compassion for yourself, notice where your opportunities are, whether it is to, do more for yourself, more self-love, and perhaps noticing how we're coming off outwards, and are we what are we putting out into this world, into this existence. So I am always reminded in a lot of the trainings that I'm currently just finishing up my 300-hour yoga teacher training right now, and just shining that light of the awareness, just being aware that we are not what we think, being aware that what other people think about you really doesn't matter at the end of the day, because everyone has this, at the end of the day, this chitter chatter in their minds and this self-talk. And it might be predominantly positive, it might be predominantly negative. It doesn't really matter. But when we realize that people aren't spending their time thinking about you the way that we think about ourselves, kind of lightens things up a little bit. And we realize how much more similar and alike we are than we are different.
Mm, I love that point. Yes, Absolutely. I think we are a lot more similar than we all think. I'm a breakup and relationship coach. And so now, after doing it for years now and talking to a lot of different people, that is actually one thing that I have discovered is when I'm talking to both men and women, everything that they're going through at that time in their life. A breakup is a transition in life. It can be one of the most challenging things that you ever experience in your life. I've noticed that, before I started that work, you have ideas around, maybe what men think or what women think or how each person is in the relationship. And really, I've noticed that pretty much most people have the same exact thoughts, fears, feelings, insecurities, uncertainties, lack of clarity, that feeling of aloneness. Like it's just, we are all humans going through this kind of very similar human experience, maybe just in different ways. And so I love that you said, what if we could, what if we could connect more with the ways in which each of us are similar in our experiences and just what we're being presented with in life. And I heard you say something also about, I think before we started recording, about the importance of community. And I know at the end of class, we take one big deep breath together and, you actually say the words in community. What role does that play in either the practice of yoga or at least as you've experienced it as an instructor?
I mean, community, sangha is the term in Sanskrit for our community. And I mean, it comes down to relationships. Like we need connection and relationships and community to not even just survive, but to thrive, to be able to lean on one another, because no matter what, none of us are coming out of this alive. We're going to encounter challenges, heartache, heartbreak, whether it's intentional or unintentional, life circumstances, things happen. So having community and support to lean on when you need a little bit more is crucial. For a physical yoga practice, it it's the sense of that accountability when you're all there together in a room and you everyone's going to look a little bit different, but there's going to be some real basic things that most can attach to, right? Or, the challenge of staying with your breath, the challenge of holding a pose longer than what you might want to hold for, beyond what's comfortable. So having these shared experiences, that whether it's, feeling weird about breathing a little bit louder than normal, or feeling uncomfortable that you're holding a pose and you might fall out, when we change the dynamic from this is a competition, which it never is, to we're here to practice moving through these hard moments together. And through those shared experience, I think, there must be research behind it, that when you have a shared experience with someone, especially if it's a challenging one, that typically kind of tightens the bond. And so moving through our physical yoga practice as a community really just makes things even stronger. And then folks come in, it doesn't matter if you're going through a hard time, or perhaps, you sprain your ankle, so you have to modify a whole bunch. It doesn't matter, because you're still showing up and you're with your people. And that hour of, whether you're just sitting on your mat and breathing next to all of your yoga friends, is that a better experience, or is that a better use of your time than, being home and, watching a reality TV show? There's a time and a place for that too. Having solitude, super important. Having your solo alone yoga practice, super important. But to have just a reason, we learned during COVID, who didn't, after a certain point, after weeks and weeks of not being around other people, craved it. You would see someone on a computer and it's like you just want to grab them through the screen and be like, hi. Like, we crave that connection. And with that connection, we're bound to then bump heads every now and then. So the more we even delve into, because the folks that you're going to have the hardest time with tend to be the folks that you are the closest to, because now you know a little bit more. So you might even know so much about them that you know how to trigger them in a way to upset them or bother them or perhaps get them to do what it is that you want. But if we learn like there's another way, there's another way to find that have that meeting of the minds without having to kind of dig at someone's perceived insecurity.
Yeah, I think it's a great point that the people who could have potentially the biggest impact in our lives might be people that we come into conflict with, either regularly or maybe even, a big thing once or twice, and because they're not afraid to tell us the truth or, whatever it is. But I do also really like the accountability piece that you mentioned, going to a class that meets consistently over a long period of time with the same or similar group of people can really be powerful. A, because it helps you stick with, your intention. But B, it's that almost like another home. It's another safe place. I was actually really, really touched. I had food poisoning over the weekend and just felt miserable, didn't leave my bed for like days. And at the gym, that you and I are at, I had someone from pickleball offer yesterday. I was feeling better. And he said, if you ever need anything, maybe to bring you food or anything, like just call me. I'll bring it. And I barely even know this person, and it's like the pickleball community, the yoga community, like whatever community you want to join or you find yourself in, it's that added sense of support and humanity. It's like, oh my gosh, this is just another human being who doesn't have to care about my wellness, offering to kind of go the extra mile to help me out. I felt like that was something that just really struck me yesterday, and that you can experience in returning to kind of the same subgroup of people over and over
Mhm.
over time. So, Deanna, is there anything else that you would kind of like to leave us with regarding yoga in general, as a practice, its principles, and how it might relate to kind of the L3 philosophy of, how can yoga help support you on your life journey, in trying to love yourself, love your relationships, love your life?
We touched on it a little bit. The it's not even an idea, the reality, the truth that we are never going to be the same person day to day, minute to minute. Like we're constantly changing. And to taking that into consideration in that conversation that we have with ourselves. So, whether it's coming to your mat and being like, oh my gosh, I can't touch my toes the way I used to, like I did 20 years ago, or, a lot of the common things are, oh, I'm old. We fear aging, right? We fear the things that are inevitable, the things that we cannot avoid, but to find more acceptance of this inevitable change that is going to happen within our physical bodies, also our minds, our hearts, our belief systems. Some things may be set and we can hold on to them and keep that determination. And then there's going to be the things that change. And that's going to happen within each and every person that we engage with. And rather than when there is conflict, to see that as this awful, horrible thing that needs to just be avoided, to just have a meaningful connection about it, have a conversation and see if you can work through the differences, and to be okay with this change. It doesn't say anything about you if your friend circle is different 20 years from now than it is today. So many things are going to change. Where we live, like what the rest of our families are doing, what our passions are, and not taking other people's choices so personally, because they're doing what they need to do. And we as individuals can focus on what it is that we want to aspire to and how we want to live our life.
So I really appreciate you coming here and sharing your time with us today and all of your experience as an instructor for so many years and a practicer of yoga. I know that you're a mom as well. So yeah, and oh, do you want to speak briefly to, I noticed also in your bio that you have been taking some time to be creative and create mala beads, right?
Yes, when those small pockets of time come up, um, I have kind of delved into the world of creating, of building, making mala beads, which are kind of traditional prayer beads that can be used during meditation. There's 108 beads on them. You can use them as a counter for when you're meditating, if you're doing a mantra. They also can be adorned as jewelry. You can see them worn as bracelets or as necklaces. So I have a few sets, and I liked that it was something to do with my hands and something that was kind of somewhat repetitive that I could kind of grow the skill in. So it's been fun. It's not so easy, but and it's hard to find the time, but I'm excited to get to a place where I can maybe make them a little more often and gift them and give them to friends, especially if there's certain crystals that I think resonate with a certain person. So it's just fun.
That's awesome. So yeah, you're able to use your kind of your creativity in picking out, maybe designs and crystals and also that repetitive motion, which brings you also back to mindfulness and just like a time that you're setting aside for yourself to do something enjoyable.
Exactly. That's not mindless, like, watching TV. Watching TV is great, but there's so much to be gained when we even can do activities that are quiet that allow us to come up with the new ideas, to become innovative, to be even more creative. I come up with really great like thoughts and things I want to share in class. Like I'll be like, and then I'll grab my notepad and scribble something down. Slowing down, we all could benefit from it.
Yeah, your mind has to have space to be able to be creative and to, be open to new ideas and just to, even to hear like what's coming from deep within inside ourselves, because there's so much noise everywhere else. So Deanna, is there anywhere, do you want to share any, like I know that you do teacher trainings and everything. Do you want to
Yeah.
share like how people can get in touch with you if they're interested in either
Yeah.
having a yoga practice or becoming an instructor?
Yeah. You can find me on Instagram. My handle is Deanna Wheeler Yoga. So DeAnnawheeler Yoga, Yoga. Um, you can follow me there. And I'd be happy to connect, especially if
Awesome.
you're in the area.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time today, and I look forward to seeing you again in class soon. And for everybody watching, thank you so much for tuning in. I believe in you, and I believe in the gifts that you have to share with the world. So I'll see you next time.